Hi everybody, it's Irene with BrainStormAcres, and this afternoon I'm going to be making some English muffins. You might say, why on earth would I make some English muffins when I could go to the grocery store and buy a pack of them, I don't know, $4 maybe? Well, the store is quite a ways away for us. And if we run out, it's really not always convenient to spend an hour and a half round trip going to the store. A few years ago, we were experimenting and we found a brand that we really like of English muffins. It has to be refrigerated. It doesn't have any kind of weird stuff in it. I mean, you can actually read everything that's in it. But it's more expensive. And the regular Nooks and Crannies brand is on sale a lot, but the one that we like is not on sale very often. And a lot of times they're not in. We came across a recipe and we tried it a week or so ago, and we really liked it. I'm going to share with you guys. The hardest thing about this entire recipe is figuring out exactly how to cook it in your own environment, because it doesn't go in the oven. It's actually cooked on the stovetop. But let's get started. First, I need some warm water. And I'm going to heat this up just a teeny bit because that's been warmed up recently. And I'm just going to get my yeast started. You don't want to have your water too warm. If it's too hot for your finger, you're going to kill your yeast. And then it will not rise. So I'm going to take a cup and a quarter of it. And I'm going to add a tablespoon of sugar. And I'm going to mix it up. Now, the only reason I'm mixing it is to try and get that sugar to melt just a little bit, because that sugar is food for the yeast. Stir it up. Now I'm going to add in 1 teaspoon of yeast. And I'm just going to sprinkle it on the top here. Then I am going to cover it. And I'm going to let it sit for 10 minutes someplace warm. Now, that for me, that means in the pantry. I'm going to use the heat from our propane freezer to warm the environment there. I'm going to get some cling wrap, stick over the top. Some people can just stick a cloth over the top of it, and I do that sometimes for raising things, but I prefer actual cling wrap of some sort for this here, because we're so dry. I want to make sure that everything stays good and moist. Okay, I'll see you in 10 minutes. Here we are. Our yeast has rested, and that means it's actually melted and it started to reproduce in here. Looks just like cloudy water at this point, which is just fine. And now it's time to add the rest of the things. First thing we want to add is the oil and the salt. I'm finding this interesting because I would not normally add it in the order that they're adding it. But I did it this way last time and it worked fine, so I'm just going to go with it. Eventually I may change it. Normally I would add my salt to my dry ingredients and mix it that way. But this is the way the recipe says to do it. Worked great last time, so I'm not gonna fix it because it's not broke. Okay. Here we got 2 tablespoons of oil. I'm using an extra light olive oil. What you want is a pretty flavorless oil. You don't want something like an extra virgin that would give a distinctive flavor to it, because English muffins are supposed to be, I don't want to say bland, but they're supposed to be sort of plain so that they become something you put other things on. They should taste like an English muffin, like pizza. Okay, so I have the oil in there and salt. Give that a quick mix. And then I'm going to start adding in 2 3/4 cups of flour. Now this is just ordinary unbleached flour. It's not special blend flour or whole wheat or anything else. You could substitute those things. You'll have to fiddle with them. This recipe was originally designed for just a good unbleached flour. And that's what we stuck with because that's what we use most of the time. We don't use bleached flour. Now, this is going to be a super soft dough. I'm going to build up some muscles here. You could do this in a machine. I just don't usually do this sort of thing in a machine. See how sticky that is? It's very gooey. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this out onto a floured board. And it is sticky. It is probably one of the stickiest doughs I've ever worked with. But it was delicious, so we'll just do it that way. And this is not perfectly mixed together. It's got some bits and pieces that need to be mixed more. But I will do that on the floured board here. This is just a giant cutting board. I don't remember whether these came from Sam's Club or Costco or someplace like that. But we've had them for years and years, and we use them for all kinds of stuff. And if you're going to use it for kneading dough, I'll show you a secret. Some people may recognize that as the little rounds that you put between bowls if you're concerned about getting them chipped when you're stacking them. We originally bought those to use in an RV so that we could stack our bowls in the RV so that when you're bouncing down the highway, they don't chip and they don't rattle together as much. But some places sell it as a shelf liner. And just that one piece of thing reduces dramatically how much this will slide around. And that's a good thing because it can be a real pain when your board is sliding all over the place. One of the advantages of using a Silpat mat is they don't slide hardly at all. They really sort of stick to the counter. But I have this out because I was making something else today, so we'll just go with that. No reason to get 2 sets of things dirty. And you'll see I'm incorporating all the little bits and pieces. And every once in a while I'll sort of roll my hands to get the sticky dough off. And this is a super sticky dough. And you don't want to add so much flour that it's no longer sticky. You want it to be a super soft dough. It's really kind of an odd dough, to be honest. It's not like when you're making Parker House rolls or anything else where you get a good firm dough and mash it around a lot. It's really a sticky dough. So you'll see me kind of hit the butt of my hand on the board, because what I'm doing is I can feel my hand starting to stick, and rather than getting it sticky, I'm trying not to incorporate too much flour, but I want to be able to knead this. And it needs to be kneaded for, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes maybe. It's not one of these things where you have to knead it for half an hour or something silly. But you can see, I wish you could feel it. It's really squishy. What does it remind me of? It reminds me of, I don't know if I can think what they call them. Stress balls. They're these squishy plastic things that you mash with your hands to take out the world on that instead of taking it out on your partner or your friend or your brother or sister or something. And they're kind of squishy. They got some sort of a gel in them, and that's the way it feels. It's not your usual dough that's kind of super firm and everything. It's a very squishy dough. That's pretty good. I'm going to call that done. And now I'm just going to stick this in a bowl that has been oiled. Now, the reason you oil the bowl is because if you don't, it's going to stick to that bowl really bad. It may stick a little bit anyway, but oiling will make a big difference in terms of not having it stick quite as much. I'm going to stick it top down first and roll it over. That helps to keep the dough from forming a crust. And because we live someplace super dry, I am going to use a cling wrap instead of a towel, because I really want this to stay good and moist. And now this is going to go sit someplace warm, which is in my pantry, for an hour. And it's going to do what they call proofing. That yeast is going to grow in there and start making bubbles, and this is going to swell up. So I'll see you in an hour. Now, the dough has proofed for the English muffins. I will show you. It is now poofy. That just means that to say that the dough has proofed just means that the yeast has been working in there and creating all kinds of bubbles. I make lots of other things in between times, so I have to make sure I'm getting the right recipe in my head. There we go. See, that came out pretty slick. If I hadn't oiled that well, it wouldn't have. Let's just put it that way, it wouldn't have. Okay. Now. Whee! Still super squishy. Very soft dough. Trying to be really careful about not adding too much flour, but keeping it going good. It's delightful. I really love the way this feels. Feels like a squishy ball. Okay, now it says I'm supposed to divide this guy into 10 balls. If you divide it into 10, it makes it about the size of commercially produced English muffins. You won't have them quite as perfect as the ones at the store, which really aren't that perfect if you look at them closely. And it's because I imagine it's because it's a squishy dough, so it doesn't want to cooperate as much as you might think. Okay. Oh, and I forgot my cornmeal. I'll be right back. I rarely use cornmeal for cooking anymore. Actually, what I want to do is I want to replace cornmeal with semolina. I have in the past used semolina instead of cornmeal, and semolina is wheat. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these little guys and form them into basically sort of flat rounds. And I'm going to stick them over here to rise a little bit, just for a couple minutes, not a long time. This is not like when you're making Parker House rolls or something where you let them rise a lot before you do anything else with them. So, and I suppose after I've done this 10 dozen times, I will be able to make perfectly round little guys. But meanwhile, they'll be a little lopsided. And it'll be fine. We're just eating them at home. We're not trying to convince people that we make beautiful English muffins. And to be honest, they tasted really good this last week, so that's the important part, is how they taste, not as if they're perfect. As I said, our favorite English muffins that we can get at the store are not perfect, actually. They're far from perfect, but they're really good. But they're quite expensive too, so this is kind of a great compromise for us. Now these are all set to go. This is just a tea towel. I always have a couple on hand for things like this. Now we're just going to let this set here for 20 minutes. Now while this is resting, I am going to get the pan set for cooking this. This is what we're going to cook it in. I'm going to put some oil in the bottom, which is something I can do right now. And I don't want this heavily oiled. It's not like you're frying it, because you're not. So I'm just going to take a little bit of oil. I'll use my fingers. I'm going to make sure the oil goes up around to the edge here, because this is not a square edge. It kind of slides up the corners. We have a cast iron pan, but it's this big, but it needs to be reseasoned right now. So this is my second best choice. And I will get this preheated right before it's time to put the English muffins in there. So I will see you in about 10 minutes. Here we are back again in the kitchen. I just turned the lights on. It's starting to get dark. These guys have been resting. They've got about another few minutes to go, about another 5 to go. So I've started the heat under the pan. I want to get this heat really sort of like soaked in good. So if you think about an English muffin, the goal is to have a top and a bottom that are slightly browned, not black, but just slightly browned. And then the sides are sort of pale. They're not browned at all. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a couple of these little guys. I'm going to dust off as much of the corn as I can. Blink. Just plop them in there. I have this down to low, but low on our stove is not that low because it's a commercial quality stove. So I'm going to cover this. I'm going to set the timer for 4 minutes. And I'm going to check it. This is the hard part. Hurry upping and waiting. Smelling pretty good. Makes me nervous though. I'm always afraid I'm going to burn it. Like I say, I'll get better at this. This is, to me, the hardest part about this recipe. The recipe itself is super simple. Is actually figuring out exactly the temperature you need to use on your stove. Because somebody says put it on medium, and I hate to say that's sort of meaningless. But it is, because medium on one stove can be high on another. Okay, that tells me it's been 4 minutes. And what you're seeing come up off of here is actually steam. But, perfect. Got some color, but it's not burned. Okay. Bonk. I'm going to lower this down just a little bit more. Now, that's got another 4 minutes to go. Let's check this beast. Okay. It actually seems to be pretty good. Hey Henry, you want to come help check a English muffin? Yeah, it feels soft around the edges the way it should, but it didn't, you know.
And it looks like it's done.
I think just a tiny bit longer. Get a rack out here. And we can stick these guys on to cool. For sure the babies are cooked enough, like that guy. Monk. And basically I'm going to repeat what I did before. And just toss a couple more of these guys in here. There's a total of 10. I hope you decide to be brave and try your own English muffins. I love the idea that, you know, it's Friday afternoon. We're out of English muffins. Do I feel like driving an hour and a half round trip to go get some English muffins? No, not really. We've had some really crappy weather. We had another snowstorm yesterday. It wasn't a huge amount of snow, but the roads are messy now again. So this means we can stay home. We can have English muffins for this weekend. It's not complicated. Some flour, some water, a little bit of oil, some yeast, some salt. Not brain surgery. So give it a try. It's very squishy. It's definitely different than most of the doughs I've done before, but I'm loving it. This is a really good flavor. So I think we're going to keep making our English muffins and just save buying English muffins when we're on the road and don't have time to bake. So until next time, bye. I get the other half.
I love the crunch on this.
Yeah, I definitely did a better job this time. Sometimes what you have to do is hurry up and wait.